Seconds away from opening bell right now, markets are facing another new reality today, reacting to President Trump's new tariff threats issued just this morning, as the president took to social media saying that he's now recommending a 50% tariff on all goods coming from the European Union as of June 1st, citing a lack of progress in trade talks there. And there's also more. He's also threatening Apple now with a 25% tariff if the company doesn't bring iPhone manufacturing back to the U.S. In my ear, we heard opening bell happening. That's happening right now. We're going to keep an eye as the markets open. Claire Duffy is here with me now. So this is what we're watching, Claire. Talk to me about what we're likely to see with markets today. They're going to be updating in 1 second. And also at the same time about Apple.
Yeah, so futures were down as it looks like, markets are starting to be in the red as you're seeing there. Yeah. And this is a concern about the trade war sort of restarting here. Investors had
there was like a brief moment, right?
Yeah, breathed a sigh of relief during this 90-day pause on most reciprocal tariffs. And now it appears that Trump is trying to exert some more pressure on the EU, threatening these 50% tariffs. This 90-day pause was supposed to end in July, but he is now suggesting that this 50% tariff on the EU go into effect June 1st. That is soon. So I think that's part of what we're seeing here. And then, of course, there is Apple. I think we've got Apple stock down almost 3%. Now, Apple had tried to move some of its production away from China because of the China tariffs. It had moved most of the U.S. iPhones that were getting shipped to the U.S. to India. But Trump is not happy about that. He wants iPhones made in the United States, and that is why he's threatening this 25% tariff on Apple. The problem is it's just not feasible.
Give the reality of it.
Apple will not be moving iPhone production to the U.S. Analysts estimate that if it did move iPhone production to the U.S., it would take 5 to 10 years. And that once that happened, iPhones could cost $3,500. That is 3 times the amount that they cost today. And consumers just wouldn't buy that product. Now, Apple has tried to sort of appease Trump in other ways. We've seen CEO Tim Cook meeting with Trump
more than once.
A number of times since the inauguration. The company has also announced this $500 billion investment in other types of U.S. facilities, production. But the thought of moving iPhone production to the U.S., some analysts have called it a fiction, a fairy tale. It's just not going to happen. And what we could see as a result of this 25% tariff, if it does go into effect, is consumer prices raised. There were already rumors that Apple was going to be raising prices for the new slate of iPhones in the fall. If this 25% tariff goes into effect, those prices could go up even further.
Yeah, no, I mean, veteran tech analyst Dan Ives, who a lot of people lean on for just reality on this, I think he said estimated something like it would cost $30 billion for Apple to move over 3 years
of its production.
Yeah, I mean, it is not happening. It's just not happening. So what the play is here, and the pressure that Donald Trump is trying to exert on Tim Cook and Apple right now, that's the TBD, because that Trump has to know this reality.
And I think the problem here is it just creates more uncertainty, and businesses can't operate under uncertainty.
Absolutely not. It's great. Thank you so much, Claire. We're going to be obviously watching the market. That's going to be another big story today.
Elena, let me go back to you over at the White House. So the president is calling out Apple, threatening the company with a new 25% tariff. Do White House officials acknowledge, at least privately, that this is going to increase the cost of iPhones for American consumers?
I mean, behind closed doors, Wolf, yes, but definitely not in public. And I know myself and other reporters have publicly tried to press White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on this. Now, look, this post that the president put up about Apple and its CEO, Tim Cook. He essentially said that he has long warned Cook, someone that the president speaks with frequently. I would note that he was actually here at the White House just a few days ago. Tim Cook met with Donald Trump on Tuesday here. He said that he's long warned him that he would put this 25% tariff on iPhones if they did not begin moving the manufacturing of those iPhones to the United States. Now, one thing to note here is that most of the manufacturing for iPhones happens in China. They have begun to move some of the manufacturing to India, noting that it's has more favorable relations with Donald Trump. But this is, of course, something, as you mentioned, that is going to massively increase the price of iPhones. iPhones in the U.S. are currently $1,000. Experts say that if this goes to plan as Trump wants it, it could begin costing consumers $3,500 for iPhones. So something, of course, that I don't think a lot of consumers or people in this country would want, but this is something that the president has long been fixated on and has talked about since the beginning of his tariff war.
Matt, let me get to you, because remind us what's at stake with these latest threats on the European Union?
Well, Wolf, this would be a major escalation in the trade war, and it is not sitting well with investors. The moment that this true social threat came out, we saw U.S. stock futures fall, and you see markets are all solidly in the red, with the Dow down by 300 points, about 0.75%, but a 1% decline for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ as well. And this reaction, I think, makes a lot of sense because investors had been hoping for de-escalation in the trade war. This would be a move in the wrong direction, and it does add a lot of uncertainty because the European Union is one of America's biggest trading partners. The U.S. imported more than $600 billion in goods from the EU last year alone, including major items such as pharmaceuticals, cars, car parts, aircraft, machinery, and alcoholic beverages as well. Massive tariffs would disrupt the flow of trade and sharply increase prices here in the United States. I talked to Mary Lovely. She's a trade expert over at the Peterson Institute, and she told me this is just going to backfire. She said the EU considers itself to be a major global body. It does not deserve to be treated like a small plumbing contractor. And Wolf, we did reach out to the EU for comment. We have not heard back, but you got to believe if these tariffs do go into effect, and that is a big if, but if they do, you've got to believe the EU would seriously consider retaliating, and that retaliation is where U.S. jobs could be threatened.
They certainly could be. Matt, President Trump, is also threatening these new tariffs on Apple unless they start manufacturing iPhones here in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. And let's take a look at how Apple stock reacting, down by 3% on this threat to impose massive tariffs on Apple unless it moves its production to the United States. Now, look, this is something that Apple cannot do overnight, of course. This is something that would take 5 to 10 years. And as Jeff mentioned, this is something that would add costs because the cost of labor is just so much higher in the United States. Wedbush analyst Dan Ives, he estimates that this would cost iPhones. It would increase the price of an iPhone to $3,500 if the iPhone had to be made in the United States. Ives put out a note earlier where he said, "We believe the concept of Apple producing iPhones in the U.S. is a fairy tale that is not feasible." And one last point here, Wolf, even if it was economical for Apple to do this, it would be very hard, if not impossible, for the company to find enough workers who have the skills and, frankly, the desire to make iPhones here in the U.S.
President Trump has also been posting on Truth Social about tariffs on Apple. Your perspective on that, because he says he wants Tim Cook's iPhones to be manufactured and built in the United States. Shares are down just almost 3%, pardon me.
I think that's clearly what the idea behind it is, to get more manufacturing production again back to the US. So from the president's point of view, I think this makes sense. So this is a measure to really then bring back manufacturing to the US. It would come at the cost of US consumers, because what does it mean? It would push up prices enormously. Even if you were to produce in the US, this would also mean higher production costs for any company that currently produces partly in Asia. So this means, yes, it could eventually bring manufacturing jobs back to the US, but US consumers would have to pay a higher price for that.
Yeah, and are they prepared to pay 3 times their current price? I'm not sure about that. Carsten, appreciate you coming on this breaking news. Thank you very much indeed.